Hello and welcome to this little crafting video tutorial. Today I'm just going to talk to you about cables, knitting cables, reading cable charts and also cabling without a cable needle. So in front of you here I've got a pattern that I've been knitting on the last few days, and that's the Antler Toque by Tin Can Knits, which is a lovely free pattern for a knitted hat that I have knit before and has this really straightforward simple cable but looks quite impressive once you have knit it. So I'm going to start off by describing a bit of my experiences. So first of all, I am a left-handed knitter, so I knit in the mirror. And that means that some charts I have to read in the opposite direction to get the same cable pattern. Luckily, the Antler Toque is a symmetrical pattern, so it's absolutely fine for me to knit as though I was a right-handed knitter in this case. I'm just going to move my knitting itself out of the way and actually pop the pattern sheet in front of me. So I just wanted to talk through the cable pattern itself, and I hope that it will be okay as this is a free pattern to just show you this, and you can obviously get this from the Tin Can Knits website or from Ravelry and probably a few other places. So this is the cable pattern itself, and you can see it's a symmetrical pattern, so it goes up to the left on one side and up to the right on the other side, which means I don't actually have to mirror this one in this case, but normally I would mirror the cable pattern if it had a direction. So for example, if it only went up to the right, I would have to start from the left hand side of the pattern and work that way instead of from the right hand side and work that way for the pattern to look exactly the same. And we've got these kind of cable symbols in a chart. So for example, you've got this first one on the right hand side on the bottom row is a cable for back, and what that means is that you will want to move 2 stitches from the left hand side into the front and 2 stitches from the right hand side into the back, so they cross something like this. But because as a right-handed knitter you would work from right to left, what you want to do is put the first two stitches of this that you come through to, which will be the 5th and the 6th stitch, and put them behind the work, and then the next 2 to move in front of the work, so they will cross something like that, if that makes sense. The other direction is the opposite. So again, if you're working from this way, obviously it's a 16 stitch pattern, so the last one of the first cable will be the 8th stitch. So then what you would do for stitch 9 and 10 in this repeat is move the first 2 in front of the second 2, so like that. So basically we've got 2 different options. We've got that way round and that way round. And I did a little diagram just to show how they cross over here, but you can effectively see how they work within the chart itself. And that's why I will tend to use charts rather than the written instructions which are underneath for a cable pattern, because you can visualize it a lot more thanks to these really nifty diagrams of cables. So you know that the effect that you want to get is that 2 go over the other 2 and then 2 go over the other 2 in the other direction for that first row. That's nice and easy, and hopefully you can kind of understand that just from my explanation and the chart that I've got in front of me. So knitting cables in the kind of traditional sense involves using a cable needle or another needle to work with. I will move that out of the way. So these could be, for example, you might have a DPN, which looks something like this. So it's just a double pointed needle, point at each end, and you can use this to cable with. Typically you would get a shorter one for cables so that it's not as, it doesn't interfere as much with the knitting, but you can quite easily use a DPN for cables. You also get a shape like this, which allows you to put the stitches onto a cable needle, and the stitches will sit in the middle, so you can move the stitches to the front or the back of the work as you want to. And then I actually have been using most recently this type of cable needle, so that this allows you to move the stitches onto here and then secure them on the front or the back quite easily. And you've got a point at the other end so that you can take the cables off at the other side. And let me just demonstrate how cabling with a cable needle works. And I'm actually going to use my green one in this case, because that's a finer cable needle, and that usually makes me feel a bit better. So here I am actually going to do the first row cables. So you can see here I've started one set already, so it's got this lovely V element and then some pearl bump section to the side. So yeah, you've got that lovely detail already. So we're going to do the start of the second set of cables. So this is just a simple cable pattern as mentioned. So we're going to knit 4, and then I'm going to zoom in here, hopefully allow you to see what's going on there. So I've knit my first 4, and then what I need to do is, as we're on the first cable, which will be this one to the right hand side. So as I'm mirroring this, I'll effectively be doing the one to the left hand side, but I'm working from the left to the right. And I want to move these 2 stitches, so the second 2, in front of the first 2 stitches. So what I'll need to do is move the first 2 stitches behind and bring the second 2 stitches in front. So I want these 2 at the back. So with a cable needle, which is this, I'm going to pop these stitches on hold, put them behind, and then knit the next 2 from the front. So I'm bringing the yarn forward in front of those 2 stitches that I've moved behind, knit those, and then what I have to do is pop the other 2 stitches back on, so I'll knit those off the cable needle. And that gives me, what you can see is I've moved those 2 stitches across the front and those 2 stitches across the back. And then we'll do the same thing for the second cable. So this time, if you have a look at the diagram, what I want to do is bring these 2 across the front. So that will be the first 2 stitches, just there. And these 2, the next 2 stitches, will need to be moved behind. So that's those 2 behind and the first 2 in front. So this time what I'm going to do is exactly the same thing. So slip those 2 stitches onto the cable needle, move those to the front this time because I want them in the front of the work, and then knit 2, and then same sort of thing, and I find this a little bit more awkward, but I'm going to knit that second 2 off. So again, if we have a look, you've got the ones on the left, so 2 stitches moving over the front, and on the right 2 stitches moving over the front to the right hand side. There, to start off that lovely V shape that we have on the row below. So that is how I knit cables with a cable needle. But one thing that I'd like to demonstrate is actually how to knit cables without a cable needle. Now there's a few pros and cons of doing this. I'll talk through the pros first, so I'll just do my purl bumps whilst I'm doing that. So the first pro is that you don't need to faff around with an extra needle. So for example, when I'm using a cable needle, it kind of involves me actually picking up a separate needle, putting the stitches on and then pulling them forward. Stitches can fall off your cable needle if you haven't got them attached as easily, or if you're using very slippery wool. So can be a bit of a pain to do that. The second reason is that it allows stitches to flow with the knitting, rather than you having to pause and pick something up to do something that kind of doesn't really flow with the knitting. It's sort of an awkward extra step involved. It's much quicker once you get used to it, and then obviously you don't need to have a cable needle on hand in order to be able to knit cables, which can be quite handy if you are out and about and you don't happen to have one with you, or if you don't really want to buy an extra set of cable needles when you don't already have one. The cons are it's a little bit fiddly, but gets easier with practice, and it doesn't work especially well with a lot of stitches crossing over. So you absolutely fine using with like this technique with 2 or 4 stitches crossing over each other, but when it gets a bit higher, it's a little bit more tricky to do. So I'm going to show you how this works now. Move the pattern out of the way. So I'm going to do exactly the same cable stitch, which means I need to knit 4 first. 3, 4. And then this first stitch, if you remember the pattern, I need to move the first 2 stitches to the back and the second 2 to the front. And in order to do that, as I'm not using a cable needle, what I will do is first of all bring my yarn forward, because I know I want to knit the second 2 stitches first so that they're to the left hand side, and I will slip the first 2 stitches off and onto my left hand or primary needle that I'm using. Obviously for a right-handed person, this one would be their right hand. And I'm going to move my yarn back, and then I am going to straight off knit those 2 stitches. So that's sort of step 1. So we've got a bar across the front slipped in front of those 2 stitches that are going to go to the back. Now this is the slightly tricky bit. So what we need to do is move these 2 stitches with the bar across the front around to the other side of the stitches that I have knit already. So what we need to do is I will use this needle to help me out, and I will slip this needle into those 2 stitches so that they are sitting on there. And this is the really fiddly bit. So what I will need to do is remove this front needle from all of these stitches and then pop that needle back into the 2 that are going to be to the left. So these 2 need to come off and move back on in a second. So what I'm actually going to do is use my thumb and my index finger of my right hand. I'm going to pinch just here to hold those stitches so that they don't rip back, and then I'm going to pull that needle out. So yeah, I've got a firm hold on those 2, and then I just need to pop that needle back in once that's happened. So there you go. So you now have the stitches in the correct order. So the first 2, or the ones that you want to the left hand side, are on the left and coming in front, and the ones that you want on the right are on the right hand side and going out of the back. And then you simply knit those 2 And there you have exactly the same as the previous cable. There you go, all in the correct order. So let's do that on the next one. So the next one, we need to pop these two in front because we want them in front, and then the next two stitches behind. So what we'll do is slip those two onto the needle, the primary needle, which is my left one. We've already got the yarn behind that, so then what I want to do is knit those two. So now we've got a slip stitch or a float over the back this time rather than over the front. So now we need to change the order of these stitches. So what we want is we want these two to go to the right hand side of those two in the front. So what I'm going to do is use my right hand needle, which would be my secondary needle for a right-handed knitter, and slip that into these two because I want them to be at the front of the work. And again, I'm going to use my thumb and my index finger here and just hold onto these stitches whilst I pull that needle out and then pop it back in behind without these two stitches attached. And then I'll just knit these off the front. So I hope that makes sense. I'm going to move on to the next cable and show you again just a bit more quickly. So here we just need to knit 4, purl 5, knit 4 again, and then we're back where we were. So once again, I need to move these two stitches over the top of these two and in the front. So what I'm going to do is bring my yarn forward, slip those two stitches off, bring the yarn back to the back, knit these two. Then I'm going to switch the order of the stitches. So bringing the yarn to the front, I'm going to slip my secondary needle or my right hand needle into those first two stitches, hold the right hand 2 stitches with my thumb and my index finger, slip the left needle out and pop it back through those 2 stitches that were at the front. So now we've swapped those stitches around on the needles and we just need to knit these 2. And again, we've got our cable going in the correct direction. Then on the second side, we're going to slip these 2 and these will need to go into the front. Knit the second 2. Go and slip your right hand needle into those front 2 stitches that we want to move, holding the stitches with my thumb and my index finger, removing the left hand needle or the primary needle and pop those 2 stitches back on and then knit 2. Let's try it once more because I know I'm almost back to the start. Once again, quicker again, I want to move the right 2 in front of the left 2. So bring my yarn in front, slip those off, knit 2, bring that to the front, slip the right hand needle into those back 2, hold my stitches that I'm bringing off with my index finger and my thumb, slip them back onto the left needle, return the yarn to the back and knit 2. Then on the next set you want to move these 2 in front of those 2, so slip those off, knit 2, slip the right needle into those, hold my thumb and index finger and knit those again. And there we have it, we've started our row of cables. So I hope this has been a useful little conversation and tutorial. I really love knitting cables, and they are especially quick now that I know how to knit them without a cable needle. I urge you to try it if you haven't previously, and I highly recommend the Antler Toque hat. It looks absolutely fantastic and really impressive once it's finished, and is a really straightforward beginner cable pattern, and it's free as well, which is an added benefit. Tin Can Knits also does some tutorials which can be quite helpful if you want to go and have a look at those. They are linked within that Antler Toque pattern, which I will also link below. Thanks very much for watching, and I will speak to you next time for a full podcast episode. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. Thanks very much. Bye.